Oh, there we go. So if you can put yourselves on mute,
Mm-hmm.
do that. There we go. All right. So tonight is a bit of a funny one than anything else. It's kind of all the fitness myths that really need to die or be put to rest. And I could have said another 2 dozen at least, but I think the three that we're going to go through tonight are the three main ones that kind of cross all demographics, but also that I don't know, it still lingers to this day. But then there's some other ones that are quite funny at the same time. Um, but the first thing we want to do is kind of like how do fitness myths come to be? So there's quite a few of them that are actually concerned about, you know, the joint or the health of a joint or the health of a muscle or a tendon or something like that. And basically what we do as human beings, we avoid it. So if something causes us pain, we just eventually just avoid it. And we make this gross assumption that that movement must be bad, where there might be some sort of technical fault somewhere else, which is potentially causing the pain. There's also concerns about childhood and adolescent development. So there's one specific that I'll talk about later on. And it kind of lacks the understanding of some of the mechanisms that do occur um, during childhood and adolescence that we need to be aware of, but it doesn't mean we need to avoid. And this is the critical part. So, James, this one's going to be an absolute doozy for you, mate. Uh, Usually there's an agenda behind the myth. So everyone's heard the RICE principle. So RICE, so rest, ice, compression, elevate. The guy who actually created that is actually throwing that out the window. He says like it's completely bogus, completely false. The main thing you should be focusing on is the compression or the rest, the compression and elevation. Because what we want to do is inflammation is not necessarily a bad thing. It actually promotes recovery in that area. So if we sprain our ankles, ice is not necessarily the best thing. It will swell up, but it will start to ease off and alleviate over time. So inflammation is actually a signal, is basically a signal for the body to actually try and repair and recover that area of the area that's been damaged. A lot of them become blanket statements and catch wind, and thus they create fear. And a lot of them, when it comes to the strength training world, this is really big, especially for those, you know, deadlifting's bad for your backs, back squatting's bad. You know, certain movements we should avoid completely because they're going to cause so much issues with our knees, hips, shoulders, neck, whatever it may be. Um, there are no bad exercises. There are badly executed exercises. So it's not so much the exercise itself, it's how well you actually perform the exercise. It's going to determine if it's good or bad for you. It usually comes from a lack of understanding of exercise science, maturation, so for kids' development, but also going to older age as well. We kind of forget a lot of things, or we don't. A lot of people don't realize what's actually happening in older age as well with individuals. Obviously, and there's Aaron, you're going through this at the moment, but there's some things that people actually miss and avoid at older age, which would actually benefit them in the long term. And so they remain independent, healthy, move around pain free, yada, yada, yada. Biomechanics, basically, it's a fancy word for just the way the human body moves. So bio means organic or organism, and mechanics is just a way we talk about like the physics and leverage and levers, leverages, so on and so forth. Physiology, just talking about the way the body works, and nutrition as well to some extent. And they all promote fear. So fear basically means we stop doing something or we avoid it altogether. Before we actually get into the three I'm going to talk about, here are some of the other popular myths that really just popped into my head or have come through conversation. Some of you, you'll be able to relate to some of these that you either heard it, someone's told you about it, you probably thought it yourself at one point or another. Obviously, the biggest one is just in society. Crunch is the best exercise to get a six pack. We know this is kind of bogus. Is basically just get strong, do some global movements like bench presses, deadlifts, split squats, do plank holds, and work on your diet at the same time. Um, Fat turns into muscle. This is another completely bogus one. It just doesn't work in a way. Fat provides energy for our muscles to work. And Karen's just got a bit of smoke on her face. She's probably heard that a few times. Squatting and lunging, knees over toes is bad for your knees. This is another one that's totally bogus as well. If you actually look at someone running in slow motion, their knees are always going over their toes. So it makes this argument pretty much null and void. Women should only do high rep training. I don't know how this caught wind, but this is another completely bogus one as well. Women actually really benefit from high intensity training. So training between that 3 to 6 repetition range as well. Once they've kind of worked between the 8 and 12 repetition range, or even the 15 repetition range, but need to be able to gradually go heavier over time. Men know you should do low rep training. I still don't know where this is caught wind. This is kind of bogus as well. You can still develop strength by doing high rep training. You can still develop muscle mass doing some low rep training as well. This is the one I had a conversation with Nick Flockus last night. Hands on your head is better than hands on your knees for recovery from conditioning bouts. For those who follow Bleacher Report, that's an American sporting news agency. And they put something out quite recently or yesterday, and they spoke, and JJ Watt, who's an NFL player, basically said, we've been lied to this whole time, saying that coaches in the US said, you should put your hands on your heads when you're recovering, shows you you're really tough, blah, 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 blah. Don't show the opposition that you're weak. Little do they know, they could have recovered a lot faster and got more work in if they just had your hands on your knees.
And mind you, Trent probably won't say it, but I'll say it for him. He was ahead of the game before everyone else in Australia. He was telling me this when I first started with him, a year and a bit ago. So, yeah.
So it makes, for me, this one is a stupid one. I don't want to talk about it because I could rant about it all night. It still shits me up the wall. And Dave's like, yep, he sees it all the time. It's a total bogus one. If you want to create mental toughness, go back to our other webinar. If you really want to create long-term mental toughness, it's an absolute terrible way. If you want you guys to recover poorly, this is a brilliant, brilliant thing to do. This is another one that's caught wind in the group fitness world. So like Les Mills, along those lines. Mum's probably heard this one a whole bunch of times. Soreness after a session is a great way to measure the effectiveness of a workout. We know this is totally bogus because I can make someone really sore by doing 100 burpees. It doesn't mean it's an effective workout or it's getting the desired outcome. And the last one's my favorite is I've got to get fit before I start PT. It's kind of like the point of getting a personal trainer or a strength coach or anyone in the health and fitness realm is to actually help you get started. It's actually to point you in the right direction, actually give you some areas of where you can begin and actually progress towards. So I don't know where people get this ideas because they don't know where to start. They don't even know where the start point is anyway. So what's the point of even stating this? I think it's just more of a fear response to anything else. But I've heard this at least a dozen times throughout my career. I'm sure Nathan and Dave have heard this, and even Nick as well. Actually, Nick would have heard this a few times back in Melbourne. So let's move on. So the myths we're going to dive into tonight: strength training will stunt your growth during childhood and adolescence. I'll explain more in a sec. Running is the best way to get fit. I'll talk about some of the traps that a lot of big gyms kind of set up for. Big Globo gyms actually set up. Last one is boot camps, online programs, and group fitness classes is the best place to start your fitness journey. And these first two are usually become like an easy gateway for big box gyms to kind of get people to sign up because it's an easy, low entry, low requirement needed to actually begin. But little do they know, it kind of they kind of inadvertently lied to that this is not actually the safest part or journey to begin with. And I'll explain more in a sec. So myth number one, So strength training will stunt your growth. What the non-believers say, an over concern that growth plates will not form appropriately. So if any kid's doing strength training, right? So whether it is lifting a barbell, bicep curls, back squat, deadlifting, or something like that, they think it's going to stunt their ability to grow. And this is one of the reasons why it's totally bogus, is because we have gravity. Gravity is what keeps us on the ground. It applies a force, a constant force on us all the time. So our body is always resisting gravity. So we can't just float or anything like that. Is we're always got a force acting upon us. When we're walking, when we're sleeping, when we're eating, drinking, whatever it is, there's always forces applied to us to keep us on the ground. So what's really happening, of what they think is really happening. So the long bones are like your femur. So your femur is your thigh bone. At the ends, during childhood and adolescence, at the ends, what happens is, rather than being like hard bone like we have, it actually becomes like cartilage. So it's quite a little bit, becomes quite soft. And as we grow, we start to create that space, the growth plate, and in between is actually cartilage. And this is where the child is, or adolescent, or the child is actually becomes really vulnerable to injuries. Now, when it comes to strength training, if we're moving in the correct direction, like an up and down force, like I tell everyone here, is when you do your lunges, your squats, your deadlift, you're pushing up and down. So that's a compressive force. So we kind of like think of a can, trying to squish the can, or an egg, you're trying to like squish the egg that way. So that's compression. The bones, or the femur in this case, is actually vulnerable to shearing. So it's more about like a tearing force than anything else. Or a tensile force, which is basically pulling it in the opposite direction. And this is where we're going to get some damage and potentially some issues with the child's growth, because it's affecting the growth plates. Because we've already got a compressive force from gravity, it's fine. If we load up that compression even more, and the child can withstand that, that's fine. So a kid is always going to be jumping around, playing sport, and when we jump around and running, especially at high speeds, we actually expose the body between 3 to 7 times body weight in a very short period of time when we're actually landing. So to say that weight training is actually dangerous, it is to a point, but I'll explain the caveats in a sec. And as they grow up, it begins to harden as the development continues, thus becoming, but it's still a window of time, and it varies from child to child of when they actually are most susceptible. Probably the more important points to actually to take note of is injuries occur in the gym are usually due to one or the combination of the following: a lack of supervision, poor coaching, poor technique, or the intensity or volume of training is too high, i.e. it's too heavy, or they're just doing too much work. So this child here, this is actually a really good example. It's from the US. I'm assuming he's about 10 or 11 years old, and he's performing, a 3-point row quite well, a dumbbell row quite well. Then he's doing some hamstring slides as well. So he's actually performing exercises in a safe and controlled manner. It's when we start see some of these elements. So if he's rushing and showing poor technique, poor stability, poor control, that's when we're going to potentially have issues with their growth. But before you have issues with their growth, you're going to have issues with injury. That's what's going to come first. So the sporting injury rate. So there's a high likelihood in heavier junior athletes. So the heavier you are as a junior, the more strain there is on your body, but also there's more forces going through the person as well. So if you're playing a contact sport like gridiron or rugby or football, you're a heavier person, you've got a lot more forces going through your body. So potentially there might be more strain Therefore, that you might have some sort of issue with the growth plates, but the likelihood of that actually occurring is quite low, if not, it won't happen at all. But when it comes to injuries with strength training, 0.7% of injuries came from strength training from a total of 1,576 total injuries. And this was in the USA. Now, this is really old data, but we could potentially extrapolate that to now, which would see this number potentially could be a little bit higher if the kids are actually unsupervised or there's some really bad coaches out there, really more cowboys than anything else. But when we do anything, we always got to look at the risk and reward ratios here. So obviously there's a risk with kids doing strength training, but there's so much more upside when it comes to doing strength training at the end of the day. So you could actually negate all the risks if you actually getting all the upside of the actual of strength training for kids. If they're able to withstand more force, so i.e. they're able to get stronger in the gym, do a lot more jump work, and be able to, and speed work as well. So they're able to sustain a lot of force at a high rate or a fast rate. Their bodies are more robust at tolerating forces, thus reducing the toll sport has on them in the long term, and also allows them to recover better. So there's more and more research coming out. Is the stronger that you are, the more robust you are, it also equals the more recovered you actually become as well. So a lot of the guys who are actually quite strong can actually deal and tolerate with a lot of loads compared to guys who are relatively the same size, but might be a lot weaker because they haven't developed the ability to tolerate all those loads of forces going through their body within their sport. Doesn't matter what the sport may be, you still want them to be able to tolerate those loads. And when we're talking about this, we're talking in terms of what's called general physical preparedness, and short term, the abbreviation is GPP. And when we develop someone's GPP, it actually positively affects their on-field, on-court, on-track performance. Strength training will help athletes produce and absorb forces appropriately, thus avoid the catastrophic injuries as well. This is particularly talking about hamstrings, Achilles, patella tendon tears. If someone has the ability to absorb a lot of force, therefore through heavy strength training, but also at a high rate, so doing some high explosive, maybe some weightlifting based work, so Olympic weightlifting, or some plyometric work, they'll be able to avoid catastrophic injuries in the long term. And I think Nathan probably can attest to that as well, being able to fix up himself with his own rehab, and he's able to move better as a result and be able to do more of what he wants to at the end of the day. And probably the last thing is people don't understand the actual age of when kids should begin. They should start when they're mature enough to take instructions. If they can take instructions and perform the exercises well, there's no harm in actually getting them starting that early. So whether it is they're 6 years old, 8 years old, they want to lift weights, great. Show them how to do it really well. If they don't know how to do it really well, potentially finding someone else to do that for you. The catch of all this is, and I know Hayden would have experienced this to some degree. I experienced it as well, that for most gyms, you have to be 16 years old to sign up. And now the only reason why this is actually in place is it's just for insurance issues and anything else. It's just maturity level. But we know in this day and age, there's a hot shitload of immature 16-year-olds running around thinking they can bench press the world. And there was I put it up a while ago, at least a year ago, of a kid actually died. And he was 16 years old. It was in Queensland. And the bar had actually, he was bench pressing way too much. And the bar actually got caught on his throat, and there was no one there supervising him. And it was like a basic YMCA up in Queensland. So there are a lot of stupid people out there, unfortunately. But when we go back to getting the supervision, getting the appropriate coaching, teaching proper technique, and an adequate intensity and volume, we avoid all these catastrophic issues in the gym. All right. Myth number 2, running is the best way to get fit. This is totally bogus. It's not the best way. It's a way. We should clarify that. It's one of many ways to actually get fit as well. So I think a lot of, not to just nod to this one. Has anyone seen more people out running just because of the pandemic? Yep. Cool. Everyone's seen it. It's not just me. Now, this is good, but you probably notice there's a vast array of running styles and techniques. And I really, and Dave will know this quite well, is at the end of the day, people don't know how to run well. We think we do. We have this vision in our head that we know how to run. But at the end of the day, it's a total dog's breakfast. And what I really mean by that is it's very heavy, very flat-footed. The arches just collapse heavy. The knees knock. It just looks like a shuffle. They're swinging the legs around. They're just huffing and puffing. The heart rate's probably 196 beats per minute. They're just overexerting themselves. And what they're actually doing is jogging, not running, and it just becomes like this old shuffle-looking kind of thing going on. And one of the problems is, not one of the problems. One of the things that I see is, it's all they know and it's all they see. And if you see people running, and you see a lot of people running, you're going to do that. Well, most people couldn't do that. It's like, oh, they look kind of fit. I'm going to start running. Feel motivated. There's more people out there. You kind of jump on the bandwagon and just kind of like see how you go. Might go for a run, around a couple of blocks and maybe time yourself or something like that. But the problem is, it's only what they know. It's a very short, a very small part of what they actually know compared to what is actually out there in this world in terms of ways of getting fit. And the other part is, and going back to my point about Globo gyms and getting people into the gym quite quickly, is it's actually an easy way to get people to sign up to gyms. Because when Nick will know this from his experience, is when it comes to the gym, and most gyms, they'll have just rows and rows of treadmills, right? And usually at peak times, they're just full. And the problem is is that usually new people to the gym. It's like it's the only piece of equipment they know how to use, because everyone kind of knows how to walk, essentially, right? So as soon as they get on the treadmill, it's, oh, I know how to walk. Oh, I feel pretty good. I'm going to up the intensity. So all they do is up, and go into like a shuffle or a jog or whatever you want to call it. It's something that's easy to operate and it's easy to control as well. As soon as they go to something like doing some free weights, this is where what they know is so narrow. It's very hard for them to kind of like go outside the treadmill or be able to do something that's a bit more specific to them. So the smarter way of getting fit. So if someone's going to run, I'm always going to teach them to move well first. And I give people the car alignment analogy is, so I had one of the guys, Lockie Wilmot, Lockie Wilmot. It's not Lockie Wilmot. Lockie Hine. And he came to me and he had a bunch of issues with his fitness, and just the way he moved. He moved it was very unorthodox. So with his training, he came to see me. He was coming twice a week. We did just a structured resistance training program, and it was just coming to the end of the preseason. So just pre-COVID, he did a time trial, 2 kilometer time trial. So they did one late last year, probably about November, and actually no, before Christmas, sorry. And they did one just pre-COVID, and he ended up taking 1 minute off his 2 kilometer time trial. To give you some perspective on that, a good time in a time trial is about 6 minutes. So he's managed to knock off a minute, and that's a big chunk of time over 2 kilometers, and be able to PR or be able to get a personal record on that. And we didn't even focus on actually getting him fitter. We just focused on getting his body in a line and actually moving well first. This is why I like the car alignment. Again, the wheels aligned, getting the steering wheel aligned, and the car moves more efficiently. So we're not wasting energy. So you're moving well, and everything's moving in the right direction. With the running side, obviously you want to learn how to move well first, then increase the intensity over time. A running coach is always beneficial, and I always suggest anyone who's more serious in getting into running. Like, I know a little bit about running. I know Dave knows a little bit, Nathan knows a little bit, Nick knows a little bit. It's worthwhile, if you're serious about getting into running, is to actually go see a running coach, get a couple of lessons, maybe 3 lessons, and really just get someone to film you running, and actually they can provide feedback. It's kind of like if you want to go swimming, you'd go see a swimming coach. Same thing as well. And they can really make some great changes very quickly, and you'd be moving a lot better, and you probably enjoy it a lot more as well. Then with the running side, doing short interval runs. So doing short bursts allows you to focus on your technique. So this could be 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, depending on your fitness level and your tolerance to the training. And just slowly building that over time. So Nick, obviously, you know what you're doing. Obviously, build up the distance over time, being able to hold that technique over that period, that distance or time frame. And another way to actually get yourself fitter without doing cardio or even running in this case, and it's very low impact, is strength circuits. Now, I prescribe strength circuits to a lot of people. I find it's an easy way to improve someone's fitness without the ongoing strain that running provides. So running in nature is very monotonous, and it's very easy to overuse certain areas. So we're talking about the Achilles tendon and the patella tendon. It's very easy to develop shin splints if you haven't got your technique down, if you haven't focused on moving well first. So if those who are looking to just get fitter, that's why I prescribe strength circuits, like 10 exercises, working different muscle groups, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, minute rest in between each round, repeat that 3 times. That's going to get you fitter. And I'm actually prescribing strength circuits for a lot of my footy boys at the moment, is because they're back at training. So they're doing running at the moment. So I want to be able to get them fitter and also develop muscular endurance. And an easy way to do that is just through strength circuits. And they're finding it by the second and third round is beginning to become a struggle. And basically earn the right to run. If you're not going to run well, please don't run well. Please don't run at all. You're just going to do more damage than good at the end of the day. It's kind of that risk and reward ratio at the end of the day. Let me catch my breath. Myth number 3. Boot camps, online programs, and group fitness classes are the best place to start. Now, the way these programs work, so I'm not dissing them in any way. I believe what they do and what they provide can be good. I believe there's a few things that need to be changed in a way so it actually benefits the person long term, not just in the short term. Mum can attest to this because she's done group fitness classes in the past. The biggest thing I see is they really try and develop the community culture first. Now, I'm not saying community culture is bad, but because we're trying to do it as well, is really develop that community side. But it almost becomes a hype machine than anything else. People come just purely for the community, even if it comes at the cost of moving well or getting fit or doing exercises really well or safely. This is the thing. Things need to be done safely. You can still work at high intensities, get your heart rate jacked up, all that stuff has to be done in a safe manner. Now, if you look at this boot camp here, now a lot of you, well, actually all of you would know that we're very big on the posture side. So we got this all arse in the air, arse in the air, arse in the air. We've got this kind of like terrible posture going on. And this one, we've got that bloody dish shape going on. So if I was in that class, what I would do, and I've done this before in other settings, is really encourage them or do the real high intensity exercise that people really struggle with at the beginning of the workout. So if people can't do push-ups well, it needs to be done at the beginning so they can focus on their technique. Then potentially later on sprinkle it through the workout at a lower intensity so something else becomes the focus. But this can't be happening in today's society because we know too much about posture. More and more people getting injured because it was on the news the other day that more and more people get injured and seeing physios. And if George was on here, he'd be like, thumbs up for him because he's getting business. So we really need to overemphasize how important technique is over being able to just execute the exercise. So that's my little rant there. They are a cookie cutter approach as well. So there's a lot of like online influencers on Instagram, Facebook, you name it, and they've all got online programs. Now, they're good to a point. A lot of them are actually quite unsafe at the same time. Prescribing very low calorie diets, just unsafe. And the training itself, now the news report was actually talking about a lady who actually, I can't remember, she might have ruptured a disc in her lower back from doing deadlifts, where each session in the program, she was actually told to increase the weight each session. And like what we know, or what we tell you guys is we base it on feel. If you're feeling good, all right, let's go for it. If you're not feeling crash up, okay, let's maybe keep it where it is, if not potentially back off. So it was trying to get the individual to work around the program rather than the program work around the individual. And a lot of the issues with all these online big group kind of stuff is a lot of the cues, like if we say tuck the pelvis under, show your belt buckle, squeeze your glutes and all that jazz, they tend to overlook these basic cues or be able to prescribe cues that are actually applicable to the individual. So for example, right, so for Nick, when he's doing a plank hold, I might say push the ground away, and then he gets into the proper position, get his ribs down, pelvis tucked under. For Karen, it might be something as simple as show me your belt buckle. So tuck that pelvis under, squeeze your glutes. For Inez, it might be something completely different. It might be push your spine up towards the ceiling and bring your hips down, which gets her into the ideal position. But you're getting the same outcome across three people by giving three different cues. And this is where a lot of that cookie cutter approach doesn't really fit at the end of the day. It also doesn't look at the training history of the individual as well. So for those who have done group fitness, CrossFit boot camps, or anything like that, they fail to take into consideration the individual's history. And what they actually do is they actually rely on you to make the appropriate adjustments, where making the appropriate adjustments is actually a big skill in itself. To be able to have the self-awareness, to be able to say, hey, this is probably a little bit too much for me. I'm going to leave my ego at the door and actually bring the weight down a little bit because I'm not feeling it where I should be feeling it. Whilst at the moment, we're actually teaching you guys about creating that awareness of how heavy it should be, how it should feel in terms of the intensity out of 10 with all the RPE stuff. It's funny how we always come back to the RPE after each one. It's actually a good thing to note, Dave, as well, the RPE stuff. Then probably the last thing is individual competencies and current condition. Now, when someone walks through the door or I meet someone for the first time, I never believe that there's nothing wrong with them. I just refuse to believe it because I've got too much history, or too much experience to really say that suggests to me that this person has come in who moves like an absolute phenom, strong as hell, and has no issues whatsoever. Everyone who comes in through the door, or I meet for the first time, there is always some underlying issue. So, James, we've discussed about your knees and your lower back. Karen, we know about your lower back history, Nick, lower back, and there's plantar fascia. We need to understand on how to prescribe based on your condition. So what I'm really saying is the training program needs to revolve around the individual at question. And what outcomes are we trying to look for? And are those outcomes being met in the boot camps at the end of the day? If your goal or outcome is just to be purely sore, hey, go to town on it. If your goal is to feel better, move better, be able to play with the kids in the yard, whatever it may be, then maybe reassessing the modality of what you gone blank now in terms of how you apply needs to change, and so you need to question that. All right, so what's the solution here? So basically it's very simple. Take into consideration or find someone who takes you into consideration first. Ask questions, assesses the needs. Then they actually create a program based on individual needs and the current state of the individual. So that's pretty much what we do here in our athlete. We don't make the individual fit around the program. So yeah, we have a certain format that we want to follow, but in terms of the sets, reps, exercises, tempos, and all that jazz, we make that work around the individual. Oh, got to play puppy in the shot. Thanks, Dave. We want the program to actually fit around the individual, and we progress according to their progress. Now, hopefully that makes sense, but it's a real simple thing that we fail to really hit is sometimes when it comes to programs, and I would say I've been a part of this or a victim to it, is when you do a program that's based on purely percentages, you might be a day that you're feeling absolutely garbage, that you don't feel like lifting it, but the program calls for it. So you're not having a program that's like adaptable, or is like, for those who know Google Sheets and Google Drive, that it's a live document. So the program needs to be live. It needs to be adaptable based on what's currently happening within the situation. We need to set, we don't want to set parameters, so we set sets and rep ranges for the individual. So, and even weight ranges depending on what the exercise is. So therefore, we can allow progress to happen, whether we need to progress or regress. But at the end of the day, you're still making progress because you're still exposing the body to stress. And that is my rant for the last half an hour. So I'm going to open it up. All right, get everyone off mute.
Well, that was the hard part. That's where all the time was spent.
All right, well, we'll start with Mum.
I just picked up on the title when you're talking how to progress, not regress.
Is that all you got?
Yeah, like everything you're saying is so true. It's so true. Yeah, you see the boot camps, and I mean, I used to do things like that, a lot of that, and but obviously getting older, I certainly wouldn't go anywhere near stuff like that. But when I see people in there, particularly sort of that 40 plus age group, that you can tell they're not used to even exercising, going in and doing all that stuff like they do at a well-known place that does circuits and everything. You just know they're heading for injury. Which is what you want to exercise and get results, but you want to do it safely. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, Nathan.
Yeah, good presentation. I think some good reminders to those myths. One comment or something that that I think about, or what I think others should think about actually, in regards to any myths or any outrageous comments or anything in the media, I encourage people to actually question everything and don't just look at what they're saying and just believe it. Actually look into what they're saying and understand where these claims coming from. You can see in obviously Trent's presentations, he uses a lot of references to studies by scientists, and he explains everything in regards to what he's claiming. And I think, if people are just, claiming things but not backing it up by science or from real evidence based stuff, then we shouldn't be just jumping on the bandwagon of what some expert is talking about, especially on Instagram, Facebook. There's influencers and whatnot. You can't trust them. So I just encourage everyone to question everything they read. Research yourself. Does strength training stunt kids' growth? Well, look at the research. Have a find experts on that sort of thing. And I think that's just important. I think for anyone to when they come across anything on fitness, you just research or ask experts.
Cool.
2 cents.
That's right. I think go back to the growth one. I actually did a research piece for my master's in relation to that as well. Just talking about the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association's position stance. So they actually have a lot of research to back that it's actually the safest modality of exercise out there when you've got supervision in place, good technique, and you've got an environment that's also safe at the same time as well. So it's just one of those things. It's like any sport, if any kid's dicking about at basketball or soccer or footy, what's going to happen? They're more likely going to get injured, especially because there's so many more people involved with strength training. It's basically you or the coach or the individual training, and usually that coach is always watching what they're doing, or they're spotting if they need to. So it's literally the safest form of physical activity out there. Cool. Kaz.
Hey. Well, all of this sort of stems around the whole business plan of gyms and external, outside fitness programs, and even online now, to just get money in, money out. And there's no care. They don't really mind if they keep clients or not. I feel as though they're happy to have them there, and they're lovely people, but they're not really concerned about the total outcome. And, small business, to me, survives because of word of mouth and how good you are. So if you've got that nailed, you're fine. And you don't have to be big, We are the Australian Boutique Gym of the Year. You don't have to be huge. You just have to be good at what you do. And all of these myths, yes, are absolutely true. With, my experience with kids particularly, my concern, knowing what I know, to start with was not the fact that they started early, but the fact that I don't want them to go into a boot camp situation where they're pushed so hard that they don't want to go back. I want them to learn how to improve themselves and be able to even train themselves if there's no trainer, to do the right thing. And that's what I did when my kids first started training with Jamie. And I probably drilled him more than Trent, but then I put my trust in where Jamie was training, and then Trent came along. It was the same thing, and I would question them when they got home, what was going on, what was happening. They were all happy, everything's fine. And they've learnt things from when they were younger, particularly my youngest, because I think he was about 13, maybe 14 when he first started doing strength training, and went through the whole growing. And believe me, he has not got stunted growth. You are what you are. That's in your DNA. It doesn't matter what you do. But as injuries occur, with particularly the growing stage, you just, modify the training. And that's what going to somebody who cares really does. Other little things just that I picked out of it that I wrote down was the rice, sort of thing. I have an ankle injury every 2 years without doubt. I still do the rice thing. The inflammation, it's there because it's helping heal the body. The thing with inflammation, everybody tries to take anti-inflammatories to start with. Not a good thing. Don't stop the inflammation. Ice is for pain. Put ice on if you're in pain. Really, you don't need anything else. And you must strap that injury until it's better, and much better than better, because the compression is the most important thing of injuries completely. Hey, Nick, are you back? Yes, you're back. Hands on knees, hands in the air. What you should do...
I'm not following.
Hands...
Oh, hands... Yeah, 100%.
For
100%.
recovery, if you have hands on your knees or hands in the air, what makes you more imposing to the opposition? Put your hands on your hips and you breathe from your stomach rather from your chest. And that actually slows your heart rate down to make you recover quicker. And anybody standing there with their hands on their hips means business.
We used to get belted and given X amount more penalties by having our hands on our hips or knees and stuff. No. Breathe from your stomach, recover properly. Everyone knows that now. Fit before you fit. You have to be fit before you go to a PT. I live in Brighton, and my friends who have house cleaners clean their house so the house cleaner can come in.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what's going on there? And the other thing I got out of it was, the worst thing that you can do when you go through a gym door is to lie to the person who is going to assess you. You're going in there because you need help, and then you lie and you go, oh no, I have no injuries and I can do this and I can do that. That's really, really silly, because you're there for a purpose. So let that person be professional and help you. You may not remember every single problem when you walk in, but that evolves, and somebody who cares will adjust your program as those injuries evolve, so that you don't have the pain when you, I don't know, doing a push-up or whatever you're doing. You can change things, and strength is what builds strength. So
it's funny because that question that issue always pops up, and the boys will probably know this through experiences. To those who say they've never had an injury or never succumbed to an injury, is usually we can find out just asking just the question a little bit differently.
Yes.
But also just the way they move through assessment as well. So we can, it's something you can't hide at the end of the day. It will pop up, and we can always ask more probing questions afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. And that's all I have to say, guys.
Nice. Good. James.
Look, I was always of the belief that you could use targeted exercises to sort of, get results in gain for, I don't know, your biceps or your quads or, whatever muscles you wanted to sort of, get bigger or strengthen. So I'm a bit surprised that you do crunches, you're not going to.
There's a caveat. There's a caveat with that. Okay, so I'm talking. So when it comes to crunches, the best exercise for getting six packs. I'm talking in terms of fat loss.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about muscle gain. If you want bigger biceps, obviously you're going to do some bicep curls.
That's right. You're
going to target the specific area. You're going to do some chin-ups. You're going to do some lat pull-downs. You're going to do some rows. You're going to really try and overload the biceps. So it's not something like, I get where you're coming from. There's probably a few details left out of that point.
Okay. Yep.
In terms of targeting, there has been research out there for targeted weight loss, and they did. I can't remember what year it was, where they got someone on a calorie restricted diet and they only exercised one leg, and they said that there was the amount of fat loss from that leg, from the active leg, was so minuscule compared to the non-active leg. So which actually kind of proved that, the diet was actually more influential than actually exercising or specifically exercising that area when it came to the weight loss.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I was thinking that the more sit-ups you do, obviously you probably build the six-pack kind of thing. So, but yeah. Anyway, that's all I have.
Yeah.
You've got to remember that when you start doing any sort of strength training or fitness or whatever, if you are overweight, the first part of the body that actually loses weight is the fat around your organs, because the fat's been put there to protect your organs, but it's quite bad for you. So a lot of the time...
Why does it get put there then?
Yeah.
All right. So, all right. This is another. It's gonna be another rabbit hole in itself. So this is probably a little bit out of my league, but hopefully I can explain it the best, right? So when it does have it's got to do with hormones in terms of what hormones are high and what hormones are low. So when it comes to guys, I'm not too sure what hormones need to be high for females to put on fat in certain areas. But when cortisol's high for males, they end up storing a lot of fat around their gut. So when we're stressed out,
that must be me then.
That's 99.9% of guys. And if you ever see, or can't go to pubs for a while, anyways, but back in the day where people were going to pubs, is all the fat was stored around their gut, and they'd have like this hard fat belly. It's just, you see their abs, but all the fat is behind it. Like Karen mentioned, is because all the alcohol consumption decreases testosterone, increases cortisol, and they're on a caloric surplus diet. So you combine all those factors together in a pot, and the next thing they get a pot gut.
Science.
There you go. That's it's a bit bro sciencey in terms of
very
explanation.
science. Yes, yeah.
But hopefully that kind of makes a bit of sense. There's a lot more to it than just that specific.
Than targeting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All
so fat gain can be targeted. Also fat loss. That's another story.
So you can't target away a fat gut. That's what you're saying.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Drink less beer.
You can't flex your fat around your gut and see your gut go. It doesn't work like that.
Well, you can, but it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Lipo sucks.
But you have to do it the right way so it doesn't put too much pressure on your organs as well, because you do have to look after them first.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's move on. All right, not Nathan, Dave.
He's fallen asleep.
Where's that dog? Where is he?
Right there.
Yeah.
So Nick, Daisy's dog, thought the presentation was good. I definitely agree with what Nathan said. Question everything. Like, if you have a trainer and he says, or he or she says, do this, ask him why. Because a good trainer should have a justification for every single thing you do. How much time you rest, the specific way you do a certain exercise, when you do a specific exercise, everything. Like Nathan and I, we put so much thought behind like every single exercise rep, how many exercises, the range of motion, everything goes into account. But yeah, nowadays it's what looks cool, or what usually what looks cool or what sounds cool or whatever is the most popular thing to do. So like for example, booty bands, like they don't actually work your booty that much. All it works is one tiny muscle around your glutes. You actually the same glute muscle in the glute bridge, but it's acting, your band is just pushing on your knees, which works as a completely different muscle.
So you're talking about trends. Are you talking about trends though? Like there's all these trends that happen and they're not necessarily
That's for a different reason, but they're still useful. I'm not saying they're bad. Just like they're overrated, I guess.
But Zumba.
Zumba.
I don't think you. I can't see you doing that.
I
I used to be a gun at Zumba. Oh yeah.
There you go.
No.
But back onto Dave's point, I think it's more the reason why it's become such a fad, or it's become more and more in the spotlight, is because it's the way it's marketed. It's not because of the way it's actually used or utilized to actually help someone. So this is where we go really off track, that it becomes we're selling the product that potentially gets us this gloriously shaped booty peach, whatever we want to call it. And it doesn't actually focus on delivering the purpose, which is to improve movement.
Yeah. So it's really
the main outcome.
Running gates, just working the right muscle that improves downstream. But because of the way it's marketed, it just seems, it's just it's for building a good booty.
And the funny thing is, people will literally take that as a grain of salt and blow it up into a bag of rice. And then the problem becomes is they become so reliant on those exercises, and all the guys in this can attest to it, that all the young girls, they see people just using booty bands in just varying ways, but then you see them maybe 6 weeks, 8 weeks down the track, and it's just kind of like, oh, they're doing the same thing and they haven't made any progress. Because they've decided to actually focus on this one tiny little muscle and maximally fatigue it, when they're not fatiguing all the other muscles that would actually give them that look at the end of the day. So they've kind of gone for the low hanging fruit, and they haven't decided to climb the tree to get the real result.
And in saying that, basically question everything, take everything with a grain of salt. Be educated enough to make your own opinion. So while the current era is very heavily in evidence-based training, there is still something to say that anecdotal evidence is still as important. So there's been like bodybuilders back in the 80s and 70s saying something about how they train, and it's actually being backed up by science. So there's certain things out there, and there's certain training methodologies and principles that haven't actually been backed up by science. It's considered to be bro science, and people have dismissed it because it's bro science. Whereas another 50 years time, it might actually be proven to be right. So it's the same thing. Question everything. Take everything with a grain of salt. Don't just take something for like actually as it is. Yep. Another thing as well is like stick to the basics. The basics works, and it's been shown decades and centuries that the basics works. If you want a stronger legs, squat. If you want a stronger chest, press. The muscles have a function depending on the anatomy around them that use the mechanics of the body. Just train the basics, get strong, and muscles will grow bigger and stronger. Simple.
Yep. Simple one. Inez. Hang on. There we go.
And I've been in a few gyms, so I know the deal. They're happy to get your money and then leave you alone to do your own stuff. And then you don't know whether you're doing it right or wrong. I'm with you. I don't like running. That's one thing I don't like. The myth that I did believe was the soreness was a measure of effectiveness. So that's good to know that it's not true. Now, my 9 years old grandson, he's starting to play tennis. Do you think it's a good idea to enroll you, for instance, with you to have, some training on strength? Will that help?
All right. So I believe so. Believe that is actually good in terms of your train of thought. In terms of the application, the way we'd actually do it is the easiest way is through our Saturday sessions, because we're teaching him to use his body weight. We're teaching him to create some body awareness. So we're not introducing massive weights or anything like that. We're teaching him to understand his own body And with tennis, like I know a tennis racket's not heavy, but it's still a weight. It's still a mass. As soon as you put your arms out here, it's more fatiguing than when your arms are here. Then you add a racket to that. So you add, I don't know, another foot and a bit, then it's more mass on top of that. So you still requires a level of strength to be able to perform exercises well. And I think I spoke to Dave earlier today in terms of when it comes to developing skills or skill acquisition. It's a fancy term. It's basically the rate of skill development. Is the stronger that a kid becomes, the faster they actually develop skills, because skills require a certain level of strength.
Yeah. All right.
It's like with cricket, you're holding a cricket bat, right? But if the kid was really strong, he'd be able to swing it really hard, really fast. Same thing with a golf club. If a kid had a decent level of strength, he'd be able to apply more force, more speed into the club, which therefore means the ball's going to go further. But also means he's not going to fatigue as fast, so he's going to be a lot more consistent with his ground strokes as well.
Great, thank you. And last thing, what is your opinion on Pilates and yoga? Because Pilates and yoga are very much on posture, good posture.
Good question. I believe they have their place, but I don't believe they're the best solely on their own. Now, I'll give you a couple of reasons why. The first one is they create body awareness. I think that's more and more people need more of that because we're sitting for long periods of time, more than ever in history. So therefore, doing something like yoga or Pilates at your appropriate level is actually a great way to teach awareness. And that awareness can actually can travel across the time spans as well. So if you start now, you're going to get more and continue with it. You're going to get really good benefits 10 years down the track, 20 years down the track, 30 years down the track, versus if you start 10 years later. So the kind of like your peak is going to be a lot higher if you start early. Same thing with strength training as well. Grandson will actually, if he starts training early, like structured training early, he may not really reap the rewards until he's 25, 26 in terms of his strength development, which is probably going to be peak time for him in terms of, if he turns professional, great. If he doesn't, that's fine. In terms of being able to be like super robust on the court and be able to just absolutely wallop everyone. Getting back to your point though, I don't think they need to be done in conjunction with strength training. Now, I had a client, or a former client of ours, she was actually a yoga instructor. And as soon as we started introducing strength training twice a week, and this is about week 3 or week 4, she actually gave the feedback that her yoga started to improve. So the key message for her was, if you want to get better at yoga, you actually also need to get stronger as well, because the problem with yoga is it can make you too flexible, and sometimes yoga positions require a certain level of strength, which sometimes you can't specifically develop from yoga. You need something else from another realm of health of training to be able to carry across. And this is what we call GPP, that what I mentioned before in the presentation is general physical preparedness. So if you develop general strength, just increasing your strength just a little bit, actually improve the yoga quite a lot, quite noticeably. So back to your question is, it's good to a point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sweet. Flockers. You all right?
He's on mute.
Can you hear me? Yeah, sweet. Trent, another great talk, everything like that. Certainly they exist, and those myths will continue to exist, and people will create more and everything like that. But I really enjoyed what Nathan and said, and David sort of backed that up about questioning everything and Yeah, I don't really have too much to say. I did have one question that you sort of answered within the running myth, but I'll ask it anyway. Obviously, with running, you say people tend to go too hard too soon, stuff like that. But would the correct approach be, and you probably didn't answer it, but the correct approach be to gradually increase to, I guess, strengthen all those tendons and everything like that? Because is the issue that people get, it's basic, people just get injured from it? Is that right?
The mechanism of injury can vary from individual to individual. So usually when it comes to someone running, so if you're someone in their 30s and they haven't run for I don't know, 15 years or something like that, then it's probably going to resort to like an overuse through certain regions of the body. So potentially they might be very heavy-footed, develop some shin splints. Next thing you know, they might potentially get a stress fracture if they keep going down that.
Yeah. Okay.
If it's someone who's got a foot, like maybe who's had a year or two off from running, it could be potentially, it could be the same thing. It could also be hamstring issues if they're doing a lot more sprint work, but usually hamstring issues occur when there's a lot of fatigue. So footballers tend to be the most exposed to hamstring issues, and especially when it's later in the game as well, when fatigue is quite high and the technique actually starts to break down as well. So hopefully that kind of answers your question in a roundabout way.
The main question was, is it worth strengthening those parts of the body in order to?
100%, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and that kind of goes back to Inez's point about the yoga part. If you want to get better at yoga, and that's all you've been doing for like 5-10 years and no strength training, you might actually really benefit from strength training because it's that general physical preparedness, because there's elements or the components of fitness that actually would positively transfer to the skill of yoga. And with strength training, there's elements of strength training that will actually transfer quite nicely to the skill of running. Now, when it comes to the running side, running, if you're not wary of your technique on a constant basis, it actually makes your body less coordinated. Now, the good thing about strength training, and everyone can attest to this, it makes you more coordinated because you have to move the load in a controlled fashion. And especially when you get heavier and heavier, your body becomes a lot more coordinated. So the muscles are firing in the correct sequence, yada, yada, yada. So then, therefore, you become more efficient. And the nice thing about that developing efficiency is it positively transfers to running.
Also, footy's back, everyone.
Back. All right, we'll leave it there. Hopefully everyone got something good out of that.
Yeah, it's good, Trent. Thank you.
Yes.
Cheers, mate. Thank you all.
Really good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that was a really good.
Thanks for coming on tonight as well. As I mentioned before, life's getting a little bit busier. School's going back, so things are getting a little bit hectic. The country's opening back up slowly. So for those, I think everyone's done the survey here. Just nod if you've done the survey. No? Yeah, well,
Karen?
Karen, I respect you, Karen, about that. So if you
the
can do
link.
that, that'll be on. Mum's going to send the link as well. She's going to pop it in the chat. So if you can jump onto that, that'll be awesome. 11 o'clock this Saturday, we've got the walk and talk. So James, if you can come down to that, if you're available.
Not sure if I'm going to be able to. I'm getting the
Once the kids are back at school, he'll be there.
Hey.
I'll talk to you about it later.
All right. Oh, good, mate. So we're walk and talk.
Yeah, I won't see you Saturday, Lorraine. I'm off this week.
Yeah, I heard.
Yeah. So my plan is to come back next Friday. So I'll see you the following Saturday. Yeah.
Nice. And Sunday, 11 o'clock, we've got the coffee chat, and the topic is, what have you learnt or developed during isolation?
I'll be there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Unreal. Have a great night. I'm going to watch the league because it's been a long
You
time.
too. Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone.
You too, mate.
Thanks.
Catch ya. See
everyone
ya.
Bye,
going.
Karen.
I'll
Yeah,
send you the
Sunday.
link.
Bye, Ines. Bye. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Karen, I'll just send you that link. Hold on.
Oh, yes, yes.
I just found it. Hold on. No, can't. Trent's cut us off.